March 12, 1944. Boeing Plant Number 2, Renton, Washington. The hangar smells of hot oil, fresh-cut metal, and cigarette smoke. You step in, and the world tilts. 1,000 men and women move with machine clock precision beneath a ceiling hung with cranes and gangly gantries. The fluorescent lights bounce off new aluminum skins, gleaming fuselages in various stages of birth, and the air vibrates with the staccato of rivet guns and the thunder of test engines idling in bays. Chief Foreman Harold Jensen, grease on his jaw, walks a line of P-47 assemblies where welders in leather aprons squat like ants, fitting panels as if stitching a giant silver quilt. A squad of machinists hoists a Pratt & Whitney R-2800. Its crankcase shivers against the hoist chain. Nearby, an inspector with pince-nez, Lieutenant Reserve Margaret Collins, clipboard in hand, traces a rivet pattern with a practiced eye. Not a single miss will pass her pen. Overhead, a conveyor pushes wing sections toward hydraulic jigs where teams bolt, torque, and seal. The scale is almost obscene. Rows of wings, tails, and empennages stacked like an armada waiting to launch. Outside the service bay, truck convoys rumble away toward the coast, each trailer cradling an airframe bound for modification or paint. You feel the heat of compressed air, taste the metallic tang, hear a foreman shout orders over the din. A young riveter, Private First Class James Jimmy Ortiz, 22, grease-blackened knuckles, pauses and wipes his brow, watching a newly mated fuselage roll past with a small grin that folds into exhaustion. This hangar is not just building planes. It is assembling a nation-sized promise. Each clank and puff of smoke is a measurement of faith, and, unbeknownst to most in that dim light, a tally that would soon dwarf everything Hitler's generals ever imagined. The shift whistle screams across the factory yard, echoing off walls plastered with war posters. Keep M flying. Every rivet counts. Workers flood out for their 10-minute break, their denim jackets and factory overalls soaked with sweat and aluminum dust. They smoke, laugh, stretch their aching backs. None of them can see the full picture, but somewhere in Washington, D.C., men in suits are watching the numbers rise like artillery shells on a graph. By 1944, the United States was producing over 96,000 aircraft a year. 96,000, a figure so large that even seasoned German intelligence officers thought it a misprint. To put it in perspective, Germany had built fewer than 120,000 aircraft in the entire war up to that point. What took Hitler's Reich 5 years, America achieved in 12 months. In Berlin, Luftwaffe General Albert Kesselring stared at reports coming through Swiss intermediaries. The data was unbelievable. Reports of American factories where women and teenagers worked side by side, running machines 24 hours a day. Rumors said Detroit could now produce more engines in a single month than Germany could in 6. It's madness, he muttered to his aide, crushing a cigarette into an overflowing ashtray. They're building planes like sausages. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Colonel Henry Hap Arnold, head of the U.S. Army Air Forces, studied his own charts, but with quiet confidence. He didn't just see planes, he saw reach. Each B-17, each P-51 was a blade in a windstorm that would soon sweep the skies clean. The production figures weren't just numbers. They were a declaration of inevitability. America had transformed its farmlands into airfields, its automobile plants into war foundries, its citizens into an industrial army. In 1944, for every bomber that Germany lost, America replaced 5. For every pilot downed, there were 10 new ones training in Texas or Arizona. The tide had turned not on the battlefield, but on the assembly line. Deep beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, the stale air of the Führerbunker buzzed with cigarette smoke and tension. It was early December 1944, and a thin snow coated the city above. Inside, Hitler's high command gathered around a heavy oak table littered with maps, pencils, and trembling coffee cups. General Alfred Jodl unfolded a fresh report from the Abwehr, German intelligence, his face drained of color. The Americans built 96,000 aircraft this year alone, he said quietly, almost choking on the number. A moment of silence followed, long, cold, and suffocating. Göring, once the proud commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe, leaned back in his chair, his once smooth face puffed and pale. "Impossible," he spat, shaking his head. "Exaggeration. Their factories can't keep that pace." But the evidence was irrefutable. Reconnaissance photos showed endless lines of new aircraft lined up on American tarmacs. P-24 Liberators, P-38 Lightnings, P-47 Thunderbolts, stretching as far as the eye could see. Even neutral countries like Sweden were whispering of America's flying cities. Hitler's hand trembled as he adjusted his glasses, his eyes darting over the figures again and again. "These fools," he hissed. "They build quantity, not quality. We have the Me-262, the jet. They will never match our superiority." But deep down, the officers around him knew the truth. The Reich's fuel was dwindling. Aluminum supplies were rationed to the point where entire factories sat idle. Allied bombers roamed the skies with impunity, tearing into the heart of German industry. And while Germany's elite engineers struggled to handcraft a few dozen aircraft a week, American plants churned out bombers by the hour. Colonel Hans Rudel, the famed Stuka pilot, would later write, "When we heard of America's production numbers, we realized that no matter how well we flew, we were already fighting ghosts made of aluminum and horsepower." For Hitler's officers, that day marked something more than disbelief. It was the quiet beginning of surrender. Thousands of miles from Berlin's bunker, the sound of war was not bombs but hammers. The rhythmic clang of steel echoed across Detroit's Willow Run plant, the largest factory under one roof in the world. Designed by Henry Ford, it stretched nearly a mile long, a river of machinery in motion that never slept. Here, America's promise came alive in sweat, sparks, and sheer human endurance. The night shift clocked in at 11 p.m. Women in kerchiefs and coveralls, Rosie the Riveters, walked past the rows of stamping presses, gripping lunch pails and thermoses. The air smelled of coolant, metal shavings, and coffee. Conveyor belts slid by with half-built fuselages of B-24 Liberators, their skeletal forms glowing under fluorescent lights. Above the hum of machinery, radios played Glenn Miller's In the Mood, faint but defiant. A young woman named Mary Doyle, 23, checked the alignment on a hydraulic press. Beside her, an older machinist named Walter Cook adjusted his welding torch. Neither had ever seen the front lines, but both knew every bolt they drove, every weld they sealed, meant one more plane flying to Europe. "We're faster than the Nazis can count," Walter grinned, wiping his hands. By 1944, Willow Run alone was producing a B-24 bomber every 63 minutes. Think about that. A 4-engine heavy bomber with over 1 million parts rolling off the line every hour. Meanwhile, across the Midwest, General Motors, North American Aviation, and Douglas Aircraft were doing the same. Every state became part of the machine. California built wings, Texas built engines, and Michigan built dreams on assembly lines. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had once promised to make the United States the great arsenal of democracy. Now, that phrase wasn't rhetoric. It was reality, roaring out of smokestacks and stretching across the nation like a living organism. From the tiniest rivet to the mightiest B-29, America had weaponized its own imagination. And the world, especially Germany, was watching in disbelief. Want to see what happens next? Click the video on the right to watch part 2.